Professor Dalgleish is a professor at St George's University, London. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in the UK and Australia. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists, fellow of medical sciences, as well as having an MD medical research degree. He's had 563 publications. I don't know how you fit that in one lifetime, but that's what he's had, with over 25,000 citations. I believe, Professor, you're still working as a cancer doctor. You're a consultant oncologist.
I am indeed, yes.
Yeah. If you don't mind, tell us about your observations and what your concerns are.
Well, I began to notice I've been doing melanoma patients for well over 2 decades, and probably 3. They were very difficult. They didn't respond to chemotherapy. And so I was very interested in the history of immunotherapies working. So I basically immersed myself in this and started doing the first cancer vaccines. And then I started working with a whole range of cancer vaccines. And the ones that I'm most interested in, the ones that stood the test of time, are actually the simplest. They're the heat-kill mycobacteria ones, etc. Well, so while doing this work, I began to notice things that, why do some people respond very well and others not? The first thing was clearly it was vitamin D. We suddenly realised we were dealing with endemic vitamin D deficiency, and if you corrected it, they started to respond better to immunotherapy, etc. I started to notice that some of these patients who were coming up to, they're over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they were suddenly relapsing. And they were presenting with relapse disease after years of not having any disease. Now, this was not unusual to me because I'd seen it before. And I started to ask the question, have you had bereavement, divorce, this, that, and the other? And then it twigged. They'd all told me that I've had my booster. Yes, I've kept up to date with my boosters. And it suddenly began to twig. Because I was very against the booster program. I put it quite basically. I've done over 30 years research into optimizing vaccines and the immune response. And I came to the conclusion that the vaccines that they use are obsessed with antibodies. And I'm not. Actually, I'm not interested in antibodies because it's the T cell response that you want. It is the innate T cell response.
So these are people in your trial, Professor, that were simply given this microbacterial, very simple, killed bacteria vaccine.
Yes. Yeah.
And even though it's a specific form of bacteria you were giving,
yes,
that was stimulating an innate immune response that was working against a wide variety of different viruses.
So that was the environment I was in. Yeah. And then we come up with the vaccine comes in. And I came to a conclusion, if you need to give more than 2 shots of a vaccine, it doesn't work. That would be one of my general rules of vaccine. And I think that's been proven to be absolutely right. The boosters are worse than useless. And they should never have been given, especially when the people who had the boosters were actually often saying, well, I never had the COVID till I had the last booster. There were all sorts of clues like this. But it was in this group who were getting the relapses, they all mentioned they were having the boosters, as if they'd done the right thing. And I suddenly twigged. I thought it's the booster that's leading to the relapse. And as a scientist, I wanted to know what the reason for that is. The T-cell response crashes after the booster in cancer patients. The booster leads to a massive reduction in the T-cell response. Not in all of them, but in many of them. And I reported all this to various mediums. I wrote a paper to the BMJ. I thought the BMJ had actually started to publicise things which are a little bit, concerning to doctors rather than censor it. And basically, I found, I was the first in the UK to point out that the virus escaped from the lab. And to me, it was completely obvious because it had inserts in it that one of them could occur naturally, not 6 all around the receptor binding site. No, that wasn't. And for my pains pointing this out, I thought, well, this is brilliant. We can challenge the Nature, Science. Every single journal turned down papers pointing all this out, saying it's not in the public interest. I mean, basically, this was an Orwellian Ministry of Truth had taken over. You're not.
This is after you've had 563 previous papers published
Yes.
over a
Yeah.
distinguished career. I can't think of a doctor who's more qualified than you offhand, actually. So after a distinguished career and all this work,
Well,
563 papers, you couldn't get published anymore.